Wasn't too much to this time.
Huh?
That wasn't too much to print out this time.
Yeah. Well,
There was a lot of information packed in the past.
yeah,
3
well,
days.
there's a lot of information on this one, but I think it's more so from my side, because I noticed like a lot of the slides are the same. And then you just have more talking points. So yeah, well, I'll wait for Chris to fill out. So how's it been so far? Okay.
It's been great.
Yeah.
I've really learned a lot. I don't know how much I can retain because there was just a lot of information, but I think it's pretty good. So the next time it comes up, at least I'll have that foundation to plug in, questions that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So, and definitely looking forward to taking more specific classes
Yeah.
next month. Too, especially about the contracts and just all the negotiating.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, we are gonna get going. We go. Much short today. Okay. We are getting to the close. These look familiar.
Yeah.
La 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 la. Don't call people if they're on the do not call list. All commissions are negotiable. These are copyright materials in the opinion of KWRI. Here we go. Get to the close. We are here. Session 19. Tomorrow is going to be the now what? But today it's getting to the close. So we got someone under contract. We went through the negotiations. We have worked with buyers, we worked with sellers, and we are under contract. So now what do we do? Okay. Here's today's agenda. We're going to talk about timelines. Oh my gosh. Dates. Dates are so important in the contract. We're going to talk about best practices, anticipating issues that may arise in a transaction. We're going to then close the transaction. We're going to ask for referrals and reviews. And then we're going to set up a post-close follow-up. This is such an important area of this class is the post-close system, right? Because here's the thing, if you are systematically communicating to everyone that you have done a transaction with, they're going to send you leads. They're going to send you referrals. And we're going to talk about why that's important. And then we're going to go through ahas and get you ready for tomorrow. All right, real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It's strenuous and trying time that requires all the attention and effort you can command. Things happen. We're talking about the timeline. So if we got them under contract, that doesn't mean that your work is done, is it? Okay. We need to look at all of the different timelines, several steps throughout the contract to close process, and get them to the table. A lot of people work together to make the closing happen. As a real estate agent, you and the other agent in the transaction are conductors and coordinate all the people and tasks that occur between the contract and closing. It's likely also to be a time of high stress for your client, so your relationship and communication with your client is just as important as your relationship and communication with all the other parties that make the deal happen. There's a reason that communication is one of our Y4C2Ts. Right, so we're probably going to do some whiteboard activities today. Sure, I've got markers. So throughout the session, you will be drafting multiple timelines, like contract deadlines, buyer timelines, seller timelines. But first, we're going to focus on deadlines in a contract. Okay, so contract to purchase, we are gonna need. To pull that up. Let me go grab a couple of them, by the printer,
Go grab those.
if you want to, yeah, you can go grab them by the printer. I think I'm gonna have to use dry erase board, maybe not. Well, you can draw them on here. We've got this on the board. I don't think I need to draw it. Really, you might wanna probably pop over here. I think that's gonna be easiest. Chris is not back there, which we can put on any contracts over there.
Oh, get through there. I enjoyed it. Like, I got scripts in the back of the book too. I just, because I've got it digitally, I didn't scroll all the way back to that. That's something. I don't have it in none booklet. I didn't.
You have the digital version? I have this, but these are $35. Yeah, I can add it to your email if you want to do that.
This one,
Okay. Yeah, you can just use this one.
okay.
It's a great reference, then you can go back and any of the classes that you missed, you can read it.
Okay.
Yep. So we are section 19.
Okay.
I know Chris isn't back, but she's like, worried.
I think would have put it if I knew how much information and. I don't know, you'll see that. I haven't done that. I think you get on the first, like the first night. Yeah.
So there's a digital version of it, it's like 390 pages.
Yeah.
And if you were to print every section, it would be more than about $35. Alright. Chris, we lost him. Okay, well, so. On your page, so what do you see on your page right now?
This is my first page that I printed out, because the other stuff was that,
Yeah, okay.
but do you have my?
Yep, so this is, yeah, so this is, we're looking at timelines here. So we're not gonna write in on the timelines yet. So we've got our contract acceptance, okay, so we've worked with the buyers, we've negotiated our contract, okay? Now you have your contract acceptance date. And then you've put into the contract the closing date. So in this example here, that's 30 days. And then you have an inspection period, all right? Well, he's gonna bring hopefully that contract here. Should have had this printed.
I have contract to purchase from the last.
From yesterday?
2 days ago.
Yeah, you can probably sit with. On this, okay, so. The first section of the contract purchase, the first timeline that you need to really pay attention to is your inspection period, okay? Now, in Ohio, that inspection period, you determine. Now, when does that inspection period actually start based on the contract purchase?
The 24 hours after.
So it's a fine day. So if we have a contract to purchase acceptance date on 9/2, the inspection period starts the following day. So 9/3. This is very important. Agents get tripped up on this all the time. Because they get their dates wrong. All right? I'm gonna go find him.
So 24 hours, like that hour?
It's not 24 hours, no, it's the following day.
Okay.
So you can, yeah, so your contract acceptance, when that last signature. Thank you,
Welcome.
I failed. Miserably.
And the funny thing is I have some in my backpack that I probably could have just gotten out, but kind of felt like more.
Yeah, and I thought I had some printed. Okay. Thank you, Chris, for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Alright, so we're looking at Ohio contracts purchase. Alright, so here's our first initial timeline. We're looking at the contract acceptance date. And then we have put in a closing date. And there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in the middle of this, and we're gonna start building that. Inspection period, so we were talking about, Chris, we had just talked before you came in here, the inspection period starts when?
The moment that the contract is executed.
Starts the following day.
Oh, right,
Yep,
following day.
following day. So what's really, really important? Your fiduciary duty is to who? Your client, correct? So if you're the buyer's agent, you better be on top of these dates. Because if you screw up these dates, that gives leverage to the seller's agent to renegotiate. If something comes up. So you've got your inspection period. It starts the day in Ohio after the contract is accepted. So if you write in a 10-day inspection period. That inspection period ends on 9/13. So in Ohio, what do you need to have to the listing agent? By the 13th? Huh?
The inspection.
You don't have to provide them the inspection report. But you have to provide them by the 13th, any defect notices. Or any requests. If you send them defect notice. On the 14th. You've lost all of your leverage. Alright, so you have to understand the inspection period, that is crucial in your contract. So, alright, so now we're looking at, we're gonna build on this, okay? Who all is involved in this contract? So we've got it under contract, who all is involved in this? And let's brainstorm. You guys speak up because I'm hard of hearing.
The seller's agent.
Seller's agent, okay,
Buyer's agent.
buyer's agent,
Sellers and buyers.
sellers and buyers,
Vendor.
inspectors,
Or the lender.
under, if, yeah.
Underwriter.
Huh,
Underwriter.
underwriters, who else?
The person.
Appraisals, yep. Title. Who else?
The buyer's dad.
Family members, yes, absolutely. Insurance agents,
Title.
huh,
Title.
title, yep,
Warranty.
contractors. You have to have other inspect, mold, if they find mold, you're gonna have a mold mitigation company. If you're buying a property that has tenants, you're gonna have to deal with that. Movers. Who else? We get them all? So I have on here, we have the other agent. We have the title, we have inspectors, lender, appraiser, insurance agents. If you're buying an investment property, you may have property managers you have to deal with, tenants, movers, contractors, And it's really funny is the last one on here, it says family members and in parentheses, like it or not. What's really interesting, and when you're pre-qualifying buyers specifically, you have to know who is part of the decision-making process. We talked about that earlier. And that's one of the things, so a potential issue, we're gonna talk about this, can be that dad who all of a sudden wants to make a decision after the contract's already been accepted. So you have to anticipate those problems, alright?
See, I don't know if this was already covered, maybe on a day that I missed, but with the inspection. Are we gonna get into more detail about like what that can look like
Yeah.
today?
With inspections, and I'm glad you brought that up. What in Ohio, and I believe this is true in Kentucky. As real estate agents, what do we have to provide to the clients in regards to inspections? Yes. You have to provide 3. Why is that important? I mean, it's a law, but why is that important to provide 3?
In case if one can't be. Like can't be present, fall back on the next one.
Yes, I mean, that is one, but what's the other thing? What happens if you only gave them 1 inspector?
Then you're kind of promoting one,
And what if that inspector makes a mistake?
and it comes back on you or the agent.
Yep,
Wasn't their choice.
right, you didn't give them an option. The clients need to choose their inspector. You can give them 3 options. But the clients ultimately need to do their due diligence, their background checks, and you wanna do that early in the process. I would say before you go under contract. When you're doing after you have a signed buyer rep agreement. You need to provide them with multiple inspectors. Now, here's the thing. The affiliated business disclosure that we have has 4 inspectors on it. So you can provide them with that information, they sign off on it. It's their decision to choose the inspector. That is very, very, very important. 3 is the magic number. I would say that you need to give them 3 options for lenders as well. Because if you give them just 1 lender. And they're stuck with that lender and that transaction does not go well, who does it look bad on? The agent. They need to build that relationship themselves.
Now, you said we don't have to give them any inspector recommendations, right?
No, you have to provide 3.
We have to provide them.
Yes,
with
that is the
three.
state of Ohio. That is a rule.
Okay,
There's even a disclosure that said like
Okay.
they sign off on if you want to go that far. It's not required, but there is I provided 3 inspectors disclosure. But yes, you have to provide them 3 at minimum. Now, here's the thing, our who's involved in the transaction changes if this is a buy side or sell side, right? Your sellers aren't necessarily dealing directly with the appraisal or the lender. Okay? Okay. So now that we kind of brainstormed on who all is involved in this transaction. And we've identified who's gonna be working with the buyer. Cause that's really that timeline is more so for the buyer. Let's start filling out buyer timeline in your participation guides. You guys all have the timeline, right? And just make sure you write buyer on the top there. And so this timeline is really gonna be our to-do list. Cause we have to meet those deadlines. We need to know every single deadline that's in the contract, because it's not only the buyer, or I'm sorry, the inspection period. You have multiple other timelines in the agreement. Alright. So now so on here, they wanna do. Who's all responsible, so you can use the acronym BA for buyer's agent or LA for listing agent. So there's several to-dos in the contract purchase. And we want to ensure that we add responsibilities on who's responsible for doing what. Is it the client? Or is it the agent? All right, what is the first thing your buyer needs? We need to ask ourselves that. What is the first thing that your buyer needs? Right, so we got the inspectors. But what, so you got under contract, what's the first thing that the buyer needs to do?
Once we're under contract.
We're under contract. What's the first thing that the buyer needs to do?
Schedule the inspection as soon as possible.
So the buyer needs to connect with their inspector. And we need to schedule inspections. Now, who's a qualified inspector? In Ohio, they need to be registered with the MLS. Why is that?
So they know what they're going into.
Because the inspectors access the MLS and they have access to Showing Time and Century Key. They're an agent themselves. They're not the real estate agent, but they're an inspector. They have to be able to access the property. All right, so we have to get that set up. So you can't just call anyone. They are actual licensed inspectors.
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
So you got access to.
You have to have an actual licensed inspector, okay? Okay, so we have inspections, we've scheduled inspections, we have an inspection period, so we're on our timeline here. And we have our contract to purchase, you can play around with this. Can I use this for something? Okay, so we have contract to purchase. And then what you should do halfway through is put the inspection period, so let's come up with a date. I like whole numbers. Let's say that we're going under contract on April 30th. Which means that our inspection period, if we're doing 10 days, would be May 10th. So you put May 10th right here. All right. You're under contract here and you can put April 30th. I'm gonna draw this too. All right, so 4/30 under contract. All right, we have the inspection period. Ends 5/10, we're doing a 10-day inspection period. All right, so immediately the buyer needs to do two things. One, we need to get the inspection done. Now, here's the thing. So inspection period ends here. What's an appropriate timeline to get the inspection done? It's not gonna be May 9th. Because you need to be able to do what?
Schedule it.
Well, you need to schedule it, but you need to be able to review it and come up with a game plan. So ideally, your inspection needs to happen within just a couple days. So we're gonna put here the actual inspection. Ideally, in this situation, we could have it as soon as 5/5, right? Okay. So 4/30, you go under contract. It's active, or it's under contract officially 5/1, that's when the inspection period starts.
Is 10 days realistic that you can get an inspector out there?
Yes.
Okay.
Some people do a shorter inspection period, some people do 7 on cash deals. Or if they're doing just for informational purposes only, they'll do a shorter inspection period. But I would say that most are 10. If you gotta take in consideration weekends and stuff. But also you have to know, like, are they living there? Are people actually there? You have to coordinate around them. You might want a longer inspection period. Okay,
If they do a radon test, it requires like a 24-hour monitoring. So
Yeah.
the inspector has to come out twice. So that was not something I really was aware of.
yeah, no, that's good to know. So 24 hours radon, so you're almost having to work backwards, okay? So if you're looking at like, okay, my inspection period ends 5/10, I have to communicate to the listing agent by 5/10. If I move backwards, okay, well, 24-hour radon needed, and then I need to be able to negotiate it. I mean, 5.5 is realistic. Okay? So now we have the inspection on 5.5. All right? And then you need to submit any defect notices by the 10th. So you need a schedule, probably, that you need to be able to review, and then obviously the report is gonna take time for the inspector to come up with that report. So here's a good question that when you're building relationships with your inspectors that you're offering, you need to know what their availability is and their turnaround time on a report. If you have an understanding of when their turnaround time is, because if I get the inspection done on 5.5, but they're not getting me the report until 5.9, that's a problem. 4 days to write a report. So you have to have those conversations with your inspectors, multiple inspectors, and see what their turnaround time is. That is something that is a question that you tell your buyers to ask when they schedule when they call the inspector, when they pick their inspector. Okay?
Could you could have that on the list though too, like what, if they have like a guaranteed turnaround time, right, or?
Sure. I mean,
what
you
they say.
wanna vet the inspectors that you're
Right.
giving to them, have conversations with them, understand what their turnaround time is. Right? Alright, so we have the inspection that's done on 5.5. Pretty. I would say 5.8. You need a scheduled time. To look at the report. So that you can come up with a defect notice if need be, okay? So now we're just talking about the inspection period. Who orders the inspection? Is it the buyers that order the inspection, or do we order the inspection? I would say the buyers need to pick it, and then really, we need to be ordering the inspection.
That way you can talk to them.
Yeah, so you let your buyers pick who they wanna use, and then you can help by facilitating ordering the inspection.
Okay. Can they waive inspection? Am
You
I-
can waive inspections. I will tell you this right now, you never tell your client to waive inspections. Ever. Okay, that has to be a client's decision to waive inspections.
They can waive inspections and have somebody they know do the inspection and feel comfortable with that, but they're still waiving it, right?
Sellers aren't gonna they don't want just anyone in their
Oh,
house.
Okay.
You can go in with a contractor, but then when you go in with your contractor, you have to get permission from the listing agent and the sellers. And they have to know who's going in, and and you as an agent better be there because you're the licensed person. And then, and you have to detail it in your contract to purchase that you're gonna do. But like, it has to be disclosed in here that you would like to have a contractor come in for informational purposes only.
Okay.
That's in the contract and purchase. If you don't disclose that at first, the sellers could easily just say no. No, you can't come in. But if you have to put in there for informational purposes only. If the inspection period is not part of the contingency. So you can have a client that waives, or on the contract, you can say that we're gonna do inspections for informational purposes only. But this, if you're doing an inspection period, this is a contingency period. But if you waive the inspections, or if you do it for informational purposes only, you lose your leverage to negotiate if you find any issues. Okay? What else needs to happen? So we've got inspections. What else needs to happen right away? Earnest money. Earnest money deposit. All right, that's part of the contract. Typically, I see 3 days. Earnest money deposit. It's a line 11, 12, and 13. Says the contract is contingent, so that's a contingency. Contract is contingent upon buyer providing earnest money in the amount of X. So if you have $1,000 earnest money deposit and you're representing the buyer, the brokerage holds the earnest money, so you put Keller Williams Seven Hills in there. 14, line 14, it says within 3 calendar days. Beginning the day following the contract acceptance date, okay? So that 3 days, 5/1, 2, and 3. So that 5/3. Earnest money is due. Now, in this section of the contract, and I've had agents who have taken advantage of this for the benefit of their seller. If I do not provide notice to the listing agent by the end of the day on 5/3 that I'm holding the earnest money, I could wake up to a termination agreement on 5/4 from the listing agent, and they can accept another offer. So this period here is for the earnest money. Your buyer needs to submit earnest money. If you say 3 days, it starts the day after the contract's accepted, the earnest money needs to be deposited. You need to provide proof of the deposit. Now, if you use Payload, which is our digital earnest money, you can use that receipt and send it to the listing agent, but they need to have been notified by the end of the day on 5/3 that you have submitted earnest money. I'm gonna give you multiple examples on how you can do. I've had an agent who was a listing agent, they did not receive the earnest money, they did not receive notification about the earnest money. 5/3, so 5/4 comes up. They had someone who gave them a offer, $18,000 more than what they were under contract for. So they submitted they submitted a termination of contract because they didn't submit the earnest money. And they accepted that new contract. That's not our duty in this situation as a listing agent. It is not, I'm doing what is right by my seller. And just because this agent screwed up, because here's the thing, in that situation, their client had submitted earnest money in this period, but they did not communicate that to the listing agent. So our listing agent, who's a great listing agent, and because his fiduciary duty is to his seller, and they had another offer that came in for $18,000 more than the other offer, they use this to their advantage. Sorry about your luck. You got to follow the timeline. And they terminated their contract and they accepted the contract that was $18,000 more. So they put $18,000 more in the pocket of their seller because the buyer's agent screwed up.
So it has to be submitted, the termination would have to be submitted before receiving the written
Exactly.
acknowledgement. It doesn't just.
So,
automatically terminate.
If the seller's agent wasn't on top of his business and got another contract, but the buyer's agent on 5/4 sent him, that supersedes that situation. So the listing agent had to send that termination agreement before the buyer's agent after the period ended, before the buyer's agent gave him notice.
Are they still obligated to give their earnest money, even though they didn't do it in time and the other?
So earnest money is a contingency. Okay? If they don't notify the listing agent that they're holding earnest money, that's a contingency for the contract to be valid. So the seller's agent had every right to send that termination agreement on 5/4 because they did not notify. Even though the buyer had submitted the earnest money, the buyer's agent screwed that up. Okay? Questions on the earnest money, because this is so important. The timeline is so important. You have to notify the listing agent. All right. So who needs to do the earnest money? Verification is the buyer's agent. But the buyer needs to submit those funds. Now, just another, and the reason why I'm harping on earnest money so much is because I have just seen every possible thing go wrong with this. Earnest money, how can you submit earnest money?
Check.
check, cashier's check. It can be submitted digitally through payload. What can it be, what cannot, or what can you not use to submit earnest money? You can't use cash.
Oh.
Clients cannot use cash to submit earnest money. Why is that? If they're financing it, the lenders need to see where that money came from. So if you're submitting earnest money through a checking account, the lenders need, and underwriters actually look at that transaction. Okay, there's no source or proof. If you have a buyer that comes up to you, is like, yeah, I want to pay for this house in cash. Okay, cash deal still comes out of a checking account. You can't just walk into a closing and have stacks of cash come in. That's called money laundering. That prevents money laundering. There has to be a paper trail for everything. So cash is not an acceptable form of payment for earnest money.
But a boat, can't you use like a boat or other,
Assets,
yeah.
physical assets, yeah, but there's a paper trail, there's a title attached to it.
Just remembering that. Okay.
So there has to be proof of where the funds come from, okay? If you have someone, well, if you come up with that and they're wanting to pay cash, you can go get a cashier's check. But here's the thing, if you're dealing with a lender, you need to ask the lender if that's okay, if that's an appropriate form of payment. You also need to ask the lender if it's an appropriate form of payment if someone else is paying the earnest money. So if you have a parent who wants to gift the earnest money deposit, you need to make sure from the lender that that's okay. Because they may not find that acceptable for the closing and they might have to refund that money. So check with the lender. If you are financing, they need to, if it's a gift, you need to know if they need to know if it's a gift. If they have cash and they have to get a cashier's check. Then you need to ask the lender if that's appropriate as well. Questions on earnest money, because I've dealt with every which way that it could go wrong. Okay? Good? Everybody with me?
With you.
All right. What else? All right, so here's some questions we've got here. All right. So we've got the earnest money here. And we're talking about communication as well. So we communicate to the listing agent in this section right here. Communicate to list agent receipt of EM. Okay. Now, also during this timeline, we need to communicate to LA when the inspection's happening. Do we communicate directly to the sellers? No. We communicate to the listing agent. The listing agent needs to communicate to the sellers when the inspection's gonna be. Okay. Now. We need to communicate if there's defect notices.
Can I ask you a question about inspection?
Yep.
I feel like I remember there's a line somewhere about, the sellers need to provide like reasonable access or something.
Yes.
So what are there? Are there situations where a seller may not provide that access? I mean, I can imagine like not at 10 at night or something.
So for the inspections. So this is page 7. Page 7 of the contract, we have line 307. It says buyer elects to conduct full inspection of real estate. Buyer's inspection contingency is unlimited in scope. Buyer may, but shall not be required to conduct an inspection of any and all qualities, conditions, and aspects of real estate. It's land or improvements. So you don't have, if you do an inspection, you don't have to do radon, you don't have to do mold, but I would, because that obviously there's additional fees with that, but they have the full scope. By way of example, this shall include but not limited to surveys, fixtures, operating systems, air conditioning, heating, roofing, pool, water quality, structural integrity, well, septic systems. So you need to know everything that is in. So if there's a septic tank, you better have someone that's gonna inspect the inspector, or the septic tank. So you need to know all of what's included in this property. So that you can have that communication with your buyer. On what all? So asbestos, radon, termites. Lead-based paint, you need to know the year of the home. So in here, it said line 314, buyer shall have a period of X calendar days, that's the inspection period. Beginning on the day following the contract acceptance date. To conduct and complete any and all inspections of real estate prior to the end of the inspection period, buyer shall. Provide to seller. A signed written request for seller to correct any material conditions or matters adversely affecting the real estate. That's the defect notice. Buyer agrees that minor routine maintenance and cosmetic items are not to be considered material and buyer may not object to these in the defect notice. So that's one. What does that mean? I don't like the color yellow. I would like you to paint it gray. No, that doesn't go in a defect notice. All right, so that's if you're submitting defect notices, or you need to also provide, or you provide the seller a signed written notice of the buyer's satisfaction. So notice of satisfaction. Why do you have to do that? As a buyer's agent. You have to communicate regardless. It's either defect notice or everything's good to go. Okay,
Same thing, paper trail.
paper trail, exactly. So delivery of either notice shall designate the end of the inspection period. So if you get your inspection done on 5/5, inspection report comes back, everything's good to go, buyers are happy, and you send that notice of satisfaction on 5/8, that means your inspection period's over. So if your buyers get second thoughts and come to you and say, well, actually, I want to make a change. You have to explain that to them. So if they're good, that notice of satisfaction, and we submit that, that means that inspection period is over. If you communicate it. Right. So to your point, Chris, trying to find
Yeah, it's
that,
on page 6, that's line 2, around 285 or so. 286,
Yeah.
buyer, inspectors and contractors shall be permitted access to real estate at reasonable times and upon reasonable notice. And such persons shall be permitted to take photographic or video imagery of areas. Recording. So reasonable and
yeah. Well, and that gets to where you, as a listing agent, you should communicate to the seller. That if we're gonna be going under contract, that you guys need to be ready to vacate the property. Who cannot be there at an inspection?
dogs.
Dogs. Who can't be there at the inspection?
So
Seller. And seller's agent. Absolutely not. If you walk into an inspection. And here's the thing, the buyer's agent doesn't necessarily need to be an inspection either. But if the buyer's or if your inspector shows up and the sellers are there and the selling agent are there. That's an issue. That is an issue. Why would that be an issue? Huh?
well, they need to be there for.
Well, the sellers can try to manipulate the inspection. They can start trying to feed information that might be incorrect. I mean, they just, there's just no reason for them to be there. All right. All right, what's the other thing? What's the next thing? What else needs to happen? If we're financing this, what else needs to happen? An appraisal. Appraisal needs to happen, okay? So you have to understand on the buy side, the timeline for a close or for the loan, okay? This is FHA versus conventional. What are two things that are conventional sometimes takes longer to close? They have more they sometimes have more requirements. What do we need to do as due diligence as real estate agents? When we're writing this contract, what do we need to do? We're on page 2 of the contract. One, obviously you need to know the financial contingency. Right? Is this a cash deal? Is it a conventional loan? Is it FHA, USDA, VA? Or if it's a different funding source? You need to know when you're writing this contract, call the lender and ask them, what is a reasonable time that we can get this closed? Knowing that we need to do inspections, knowing that we need to do an appraisal. Don't just write in, oh yeah, we can close this in 20 days. You need to call the lender if this is a finance loan and find out if this is a reasonable time. Because what happens, this is part of this communication. Yes, we're doing contract to close and we have timelines, but the biggest part of this section today is communication. So you need, as you were writing this contract, not after you submit the contract and not after it's accepted, do you call the lender. You call the lender before you submit this. And you need to know what is a reasonable timeline for this to actually close. Obviously, things are going to happen in a transaction. We're going to talk about being able to anticipate. But a reasonable timeline, you need to know from the lender. You can't just make up a date that because you want to close on May 20th because it's our anniversary and it be that doesn't matter. Closing dates just don't come out nowhere.
Why does underwriting take so long?
Why does underwriting
Yeah.
take so long? Well,
Where does it's not the entire process?
so underwriting covers the financing part, right? And so there's different issues with FHA loan versus conventional loan as far as structural things that can and cannot be wrong with property. But a lot of it has to do with the person. So, you know, if they have, for instance, my ex-husband's name is Richard Johnson. It's like one of the most common names there are. There are a lot of really bad Richard Johnsons in Ohio. So when we bought the house, we had to extend our closing period by a week because all this stuff came up on really bad Richard Johnsons that had, you know, fraud, who had bankruptcy, who had all this other stuff. And he had to handwrite a letter for every single one of those marks. Like, I am not, like a disclaimer, I am not the Richard Johnson who did this.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't they just be,
You would think.
all right, I don't wanna get in the way. I'm
You would
sorry.
think. You can go down a whole bunny trail.
Yeah, I'm sure you.
You would think. So, here's another thing. You might be in the underwriting process and there is something that was missed on the application with regards to the employment. Because they in underwriting will go through and call your employer and make sure that you are, they will ask, I've received this phone call, you know, is this person likely to get a raise or is this person likely to continue on? Like, if the employer's thinking about downsizing or laying off a bunch of employees, they have to disclose that. Because the underwriting is basically confirming the strength of the loan and the person who is getting that loan to make sure, because they're lending money. They're not going to just lend it to anyone. Because if that person defaults on that loan, that bank loses money. So that's why our underwriting takes so long.
Are there-
No, go ahead.
I can ask the question. I guess I was just wondering, are there ways to be proactive about like reporting some of that stuff? Like to have some of it, like a statement from your employer that addresses some of those questions in advance? Or
It's really not the stuff that hangs it up. I mean, they have to do all those things, but they can't really, they won't go to underwriting before you're under contract in a specific property. Because they're looking at so many different things that are tied directly to that property, the
Right.
amount. So there's not too much that you can do ahead of time. However, you can have the conversation, I think we go over this later, is like, okay, we're under contract. Don't go out and buy a bunch of furniture for the house.
don't do those crimes you were planning.
Yeah, don't go and buy a new car. Like you literally, they need to do a freeze on their finances because they could impact their debt to income ratio, which could impact the loan.
Was that like paying off your credit cards too, or is
Oh my God, don't sign up for credit cards, don't sign up for anything.
like paying like off your credit card, you know, like you pay
So
off credit
when
card?
meeting with the lender, they're gonna look to your debt to income ratio and they're gonna tell you, they're gonna give you strategies like, okay. You've got this credit card with X amount of dollars on it, let's just get that cleaned up and pay that off. Or you may have debt that with the loan, you might be getting cash from the loan, that's usually with refinance, and they'll tell you to pay that off, or there's different strategies, but again, stay in your lane on that, let your lender explain all of those details, but they usually get that makeup when they get pre-approved before you're even writing a contract on. And that's part of the pre-approving your client as well, like they need to be transparent. And we'll go, I'm jumping ahead. I'm jumping ahead, okay? So now we have the appraisal. Who orders the appraisal? Lender orders the appraisal, okay? So then you have an appraisal period. Here's the close date. We're gonna say this is 5/31. You know, the appraisal. Now that is a contingency, is it not? The appraisal is a contingency. So you need, so on here, there is a section on the appraisal. Appraisal contingency and making sure that it's within calendar days. You, on this, we're on page 3 of the contract. You need to ask the lender what that timeline is. Okay, so if you want to close in 30 days and you're FHA, you better talk to your lender because he's probably gonna tell you to make that date different. Okay, ask the lender on the appraisal period. Don't be afraid, you need to have a good relationship with the lender. There's nothing wrong with calling just to confirm a date. Don't just put stuff in the contract because you want to make it look more appealing. All right. So the appraisal due, say 5/25. Usually at this time, we're getting a clear to close. All right. So this is what we just kind of came up with, right? It's not just contract acceptance and closing. We've got all these other aspects involved in here. All right. So these are interaction communication. So we common interaction, you need to communicate all the deadlines. Communication of contract to all the parties. So we talked about not only lenders involved, title. We got to include title in all of this. Lender and buyer communication, communication of lists of recommendation of title companies. That should all happen before you go under contract. Scheduling and communication with inspectors and listing agents, sending amendments and inspection reports to the other side. And then this is what we just talked about. When am I reminding the buyers to not make big purchases during the contract period? Stop. I mean, honestly, even while you're looking, because you want to be able to go to a property and be ready to put a contract down and they've been pre-approved, that starts at pre-approval date. No purchases. And then you're communicating when to set up utilities, right? You gotta do that towards the end of the contract. We're getting like clear to close. They need to know that they need to set up their utilities, water, I would have like, I literally create a sheet. Like a template. That you could handwrite in, like, okay, utility companies for this property, it's gonna be Duke. Water, you have to know, like, just, it's not always Greater Cincinnati Water Works. If you move out to Terrace Park, you're dealing with Indian Hill Water. So you just have to know what the different things are, so I would create. In your packet, little cheat sheet of all the different, call the cable company. Have resources that you can just hand over to your client and say, okay, I did all the homework for you. Make sure, you have to make it as easy as possible. There's actually companies out there that you can outsource, that the clients pay for, that will set up all their utility, like everything for them.
I'm wondering if, like, just something that I heard in the past, if they're wanting to negotiate your commission down, and you say, okay, but you're gonna do some of the legwork here, would you, at that point, like, say that's something that they can do, they can make those phone calls and get those set up themselves? Or to get the dates
So
for it
who's
set up?
negotiating your commission? Your buyers
Yes.
wanting to pay you less?
Mhm.
I mean, that's gotta be dealt with beforehand at the beginning. That nitpicking stuff means that if they're getting to that point where they're trying to negotiate your rate down, that means you're not delivering your value proposition well. When you start identifying so when the NAR settlement happened a couple years ago, there were so many agents that were posting this, here's all the things I do in a transaction. I negotiate the contract, I set up this, like, it was just like an obscene list. When they were putting out that list of all the things that they did, I felt like it was holding them to the fire. It gave buyers opportunity to be like, okay, well, I don't need you to do this, this, and this, so I only wanna pay you 3%. You're not it's not an à la carte service here.
Right.
Right, so I think you have to look at it, if someone's trying to nitpick how much they're gonna pay you and try to negotiate that down, then you have to look at how you're delivering your value proposition, because that's probably the bigger issue.
I always wondered if, like, what if they turn the.
You're gonna have to speak on, like,
Sorry, I was always wondering that, like, how would they, like, trying to go lower on your, so, like, what do you do?
what do you do? I mean, it's conversation when you're sitting down with your buyer rep. You show what your value proposition is. And if they're contesting it and want a lower price, cause you can say, the thing is with the buyer rep agreement, I'm gonna do my best to have the sellers pay for my commission. However, that's not always the case, and you need to be prepared that my fee is 3%, 3 or 2, or whatever you charge, commissions are negotiable. And that this is my value proposition, these are the things that I deliver on. And they need to be ready to pay for that. Now, you may be able to get the sellers to pay for that, but it's not always guaranteed. The thing is you have to really nail what your value proposition is and be able to articulate it, and you don't have to worry about that negotiating. But that's a situation you have to address when it comes.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Documentation points. Think about the possible documentation that you'll need to present to your buyers. Continue to use the buyer timeline, so still have your buyer timeline. And do your best to track the documentation points in the correct chronological order. You can always come back to this, so consideration points, let's see, let's just go to the next page. It's just. Big part. They're talking about communication, documentation, things that you have to send, so you need to send the inspection period. That's a document that you send, or the inspection report. What is the most important thing that you should do not most important thing, what is a important detail that you need to know just in your your buyer consultation? What do you need to know is with regard to communication? The best way to communicate, their preferred method. Not everyone's the same. Is your preferred method email? Well, I can tell you my personal email, I don't get notifications for it. So if people send me, not my work email, obviously, but like my personal Gmail account that is inundated with spam, that is not the best form of communication for me. Because I check that probably once a day, but there's, on the weekends, I don't check that bad boy at all, okay? Because when I check it on the weekends, then I'm inclined to check the work ones. So I don't check my email on the weekend. I'm not a active real estate agent. So for me, my best form of communication is probably text message. All right, you have to know what their best form of communication is. All right, then when you're sending something via email, you might as well follow up with a text. Say I just sent you something via DocuSign or Docbook or whatever you use on that. And then you have to make sure when you send something that you know when it needs to be sent. You have to have expectations on when you're going to receive it back. If it's a document that needs to be signed, you have to let them know it's been sent. I need this signed by this time. And then at that time, if you don't have it, you need to know to follow up with it. So this is all part of the timeline. We got to make sure that we know in that communication. But we can create systems around keeping up with all of this. There are checklists that you can create to stay on top of this. Mark it off. There's stuff, there's templates in Command, there's templates. I think the board even has a checklist of the timelines that you can utilize. All right, so now we're talking about the seller side. Seller side is easier. Let's be real. That's why listings are king. All right. You're working with a smaller group. You're still dealing though with the buyer's agent. You're still dealing with the title company. Because the title company is going to communicate. Well, your buyer's agent's going to communicate to you as a listing agent, you're clear to close, but you still with the title company, they're going to communicate to you. Here's the thing, if you're dealing with a seller and they owe money somewhere, there's liens on the property, you have to be able to communicate that, and the title company is going to communicate because they're doing the title search. They find stuff on that title has liens on it, they're going to find it and they're going to communicate it. Who else? Who else is involved in the seller side transaction? We still need movers there.
Inspectors. Have to schedule.
Well, yeah, you'll have to, the inspectors are gonna be there, appraisal is gonna be there, so it's a lot of the same people.
Staging company.
But who are you working with directly with your seller? Who else is involved before it even hits the market? Photography, right? You gotta let your sellers know that you've got a photographer coming over, so you have to communicate to them, they gotta get their house clean. Maybe you hire a professional cleaner that comes in before you get the photography done. Right. All right, so here is example of the seller timeline. All right, so you get under contract. Very similar. And you have to, as a listing agent, communicate to your sellers when the inspectors need to come in, when the appraiser needs to come in. You need to communicate to the sellers when you receive the defect notice. Because there's also timelines in the contract to purchase. When you receive a defect notice from a seller or from a buyer, you have, I think, 3 days to respond. Okay? And then that's when you gotta negotiate, part of contingency. Okay? You have to know, as the seller's agent, you have to know the timeline just as well as the buyer's agent does, because you have to be able to identify areas where if your seller is starting to have second thoughts, they can get out of the contract. You have to know contingency periods, okay? So we talked about communication of deadlines, communication of contract to the other parties. Communication of a list of recommended contractors, movers, cleaners, so you gotta be able to have them ready to go, so you better have a cleaner in your allied partners. Better have a photographer. I would work with a moving company. Have those in your pocket, present them to your sellers beforehand. They have to be able to make decisions and you can communicate. That's part of your value. This is part of your value proposition, right? Send the contract to the title company. Just because the buyer's agent has ordered title, doesn't mean that you're not also have a part. Title will reach out to you because you have to fill in your part of it. Okay? Sending amendments, inspection reports, title, all the stuff, okay? Now you have to think about it. Here's something with communication. What are we required to do in Ohio as realtors?
With regard to,
Communication for a transaction. What do we have? What are we required to do? We need to save all communication has to be stored for 3 years. 3 years, all your contracts, all the communication, emails, text messages, everything need to be recorded for 3 years. So what Maggie does, I was talking to her yesterday about this, is she sets up, so you have unlimited storage with your KW email, by the way. Every transaction you have, save it on your Google Drive. All the documents, drop them into that Google Drive. All of the emails, you can save them and drop them into that Google Drive. All of your text messages, screenshot, save it into your Google Drive. Okay? I know it's a lot. That's your responsibility. Save it into those files. I would refrain. If you are starting to get into a sticky situation, I would refrain from talking on the phone. You need to document those conversations. If you are on the phone with a seller, or if you're on the phone with a buyer's agent, or you're on the phone, you send a follow-up email recapping exactly what you just went over. Do not negotiate the contract without a paper trail. Follow up, any kind of communication, document it. Okay? And you have to look, you have to think about, okay, is this communication? Should this be me picking up the phone call and calling my seller or buyer? Or do I need to send an email? And then when you're sending a document, who's it going to? You have to make sure you include all the parties. And knowing what's the best pathway for communication. And what's the best path for follow-up? And again, is there a template? Is there a system? Yes, there's always a system. Okay. So there are, and I'm not going to go into too much of this because there's just a lot. This class, this specific class is probably 2 hours, easy. And we're already getting on like 10:45. Command. Managing your pipeline in command. I know you came to my class when we did that, right? There's ways that you can do checklists through the pipeline. So as you move somebody from point A to point B, you can have checklists that say, okay, so we are now under contract and we're going into the earnest money period. They could have hyperlinks to where they could do that. You could go really in depth, but opportunities help you know your pipeline throughout the transaction process. So that can help you. You create tasks for yourself, like, okay, so I'm inspections period over, now what do I do? So there's some fun stuff in there.
That's comforting because I'm like, whoa.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, so now we're gonna talk about potential risks. How to avoid risks. Okay? Risk avoidance. We are clearly communicating as often as possible. There's never over communication. You can over communicate if you disclose too much about your client to the co-op. That's over communicating. So if you're a seller's agent, you have a listing and the co-op calls you and asks you questions before they write that contract. Awkward silence is okay, because a buyer's agent, the strategy is they will call and they will leverage whatever information you feed to them to write into their contract. It happens, okay? So you have to make sure you're doing your fiduciary duty to your client. Make sure you do not express or give too much information like, oh yeah, my client got a job, they really have to sell this house, otherwise. Okay, that's giving ammo, right? But you need to communicate timelines, you need to communicate the contracts, you need to get the signatures, you need to make sure that you're sending them copies of everything. And set expectations up front. That's where you're setting expectations. Do not go out and buy that $100,000 car or lease that car or buy furniture for the or for the house. People get excited. I got excited when I went under contract for my house 15 years ago. You know the first thing I did? I went and bought a couch and financed it. Yeah, that was a fun conversation.
So how long would you do it after, like, you can do it right after you close? I mean,
They can do whatever they want once the signature's dry. I wouldn't suggest, I mean, obviously they need to do it within reason, but yeah, during that period of time, they can't finance anything, you need to communicate that, set expectations up front. Set expectations around the inspection period and let them know. Don't go on, okay, we get under contract. Don't go on vacation for a week. We got things to do, and maybe they have a vacation set expectations, okay, you need to be available on this day. Because we have inspections scheduled for 5/5. I know you're in Florida, or I know you're overseas. This has all happened. I'm bringing these topics up because they happen. Okay, I need you to be available at this time on this day so that we can go over it. Setting expectations, communicating that. And maintain your professionalism. You cannot let your clients know that you get rattled. Things happen in a transaction that we cannot control. Things will come up in the title search when you're representing the buyer that may impact the contract. You have to communicate. So not only communicate, even if it's a hard conversation, get used to having hard conversations. Even if it's a hard conversation, you have to make sure that you're coming with solutions and let them know, okay, well, here's a hiccup that we've had. Full transparency. The seller has a lien that may prevent him from being able to sell. You have to extend the closing out because we have to get permission from his current lender that they're okay with this turning into a short sale. You have to communicate to your buyers and your sellers and understand that, yes, things may not go right. You're gonna have upset parties. It's just how you communicate will deliver. And here's the thing, if you don't communicate in a timely manner, we had an issue a couple weeks ago where the buyer's agent didn't verify if the funds had been transferred for the closing. That impacted the closing. It made it a dry closing. The sellers walked out of here without their money. That's not right. Okay? So here's that part of your timeline. If we have to fund X amount of dollars, put that on there. That better be on your list to verify that they have sent the funds. You need to make sure you're communicating to the clients that they need to verify with the title company wiring instructions. And you need to communicate right now. So this is written before all this fraud's going on. You need to communicate to your clients that they should never, ever, 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 ever blindly wire funds. There are scams out there where I had this happen. We had an agent, actually a TCG. I got an email with his email signature. It actually went to Allie, and then they forwarded it to me, and it says, hey, I'm getting updated banking information. Here's my new banking information for my next commission. And it had that agent's email signature in there. They forwarded to me, hey, can you reach out to this agent because they need to change their banking information? And I responded, do you look at what the email is? That is not his email address. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. That is going on. There's emails that are going out there pretending to be a title company. Congratulations on your clear to close. I need you to wire the funds and this amount of money to this account. And it happened. We had one that happened a couple weeks ago and they wired like $10,000. They're out that money. Because the client did not call to verify with that company that it was valid. They're getting really, really good at fraud. You need to educate your buyers specifically and your sellers that they are not to wire any funds without communicating to you and without communicating to that actual title company. So we have a wire fraud disclosure. 100%, have your client sign it, but that's part of the buyer that's part of your presentation to the buyer and to the sellers. That, I mean, it's just huge. Okay? Sometimes when you're negotiating the defect notice, they're gonna want more than they're willing to do. You have to be reasonable. Let them know, hey, you know, I understand you don't like the color of the paint. But that's not what, you know, the defect notice. Come up with solutions for them. Be able to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversation. Alright? And then let's look at the timeline over here. Where on the timeline is this deal risk of falling apart? Where on this timeline? For the deal that this deal could fall apart,
Any of the deadlines.
any and all. At any point during this entire transaction. I've had buyers. I had a buyer. Happened a couple years ago. I have, of course, I can read a book, and I've never even sold a house. Okay. Transaction, cash deal. She had a letter from her bank verifying the funds, cash deal. She shows up to closing, she signs, everything's good to go. She's like, okay, yep, the funds are getting wired. All right, it was a dry closing. Dry closing. Dry closing. Days and days go by. And we realize that bank letter was fraud. She actually did not have those funds. She was supposed to be receiving an inheritance that never came through. So the sellers, the dry closing, they were completely out. They had to put their house back on the market. It ended up selling. But that purchase of that home, their sale of their home was contingent for the purchase of their next home. So not only did this particular agent not do their due diligence and really verify that those funds are real, it impacted not only that transaction, it impacted it, especially when there's contingencies for their purchase of their next home, the sale of this home, it just impacted so many different families because one agent didn't do their due diligence to verify that that letter was real.
So just always call and verify any and everything.
You have to. That's your part of your value proposition.
Was that the pre-approval letter? Which letter was that?
It was a verification of cash funds in their account. And I called the banker when this started happening, and he's like, that's not my signature. This particular bank doesn't actually give these letters out.
That's fine.
It sucks. It sucks. I get it. So you have to identify areas of risk of this transaction falling apart. It could fall apart at any point, but really what you can do, what are the best practices to keep the deal alive is communication. And then identifying like, okay, this deal could understand what contingencies are part of the deal. Inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, earnest money contingency. Okay, you got to know those different timelines and anticipate, okay, if my buyer can't come up with the $2,000 earnest money, that's an issue. So what do we do on here? How much money, when I'm writing, how much money can you put down tomorrow? Okay, I can put down $2,000. Can you? That's where you have to, in the pre-approving your own buyer, know how much money they can bring to the table. Okay? You can identify when you're in the inspection, you can get, I mean. Maybe you call the inspector when they're done. Yes, they're writing that report, but hey, are there any items that are gonna really be an issue for me? Yes. I highly suggest getting radon, or I saw termite stuff. You need to get termite mitigation, or you need to get a termite company in. You have to be able to anticipate potential issues. All right?
How soon can you ask for the earnest money? I mean, can you ask for it early on? I mean,
Yeah, technically no, like. They need, if you're out showing houses and ready to write a contract, like you need to make sure. That you know how much they wanna put down and that they have those funds accessible before you go out and see, going to showings. You can't pre-deposit money before, technically with the state of Ohio, I mean. Because like once we retain it, then it just gets messy, but yeah.
is this all the stuff that I'd never heard of transaction coordinators before? Is this
Yeah.
that they do?
Yeah, so the end of this, it's like, you don't wanna do this stuff, hire somebody. Yeah,
Because, I mean, if you're like awesome and you're selling multiple houses, I can't imagine.
yes, yes, and that's a good point, because what happens is you get agents who start to get traction in their business. And they do not hire a transaction coordinator, and what happens in the spring market. May, June, well, even April, they're so busy doing this stuff that what are they not doing?
Legion.
Yes, so then what happens in August and September? They have nothing. And then you have the roller coaster of real estate because they're worried about the transaction that they're currently in, that they're not filling their pipeline to continue with the transactions. And then they're looking up in August and in September and they can't pay their bills because they spent all the time doing this and all this cost is $400 through 2,000 a laptop. So that they can not worry about this and they can worry about getting their next one under contract or lead generating to fill their pipeline. So yes, I would say when you're at more than one transaction a month, you really need to hire a TC. Yes, good point. Okay. I love this topic. So much stuff. I thought the database one was my favorite, but I'm pretty sure this one is. Okay, and be a fiduciary. Always act in your client's best interest, even when it seems to conflict with your own. Right? We have talked about getting through rough patches and setting your deal up for success close. Unfortunately, some deals will not close. And some deals should not close. Right? Who can give me an example of why a transaction should not close?
They're picking at everything,
Yeah.
or nitpicking, you know, like, oh, this isn't right, or I don't like this.
The inspector comes back and says the house is falling down the hill. Structural issues, identify, so just because. There's a way to piece a transaction together and keep it together by your grit. But also you need to recognize when maybe you should not be trying to keep a transaction together. Your fiduciary duty is to your client. It's not to your pocket and your commission. There will be times that it hurts. You have a deal that falls apart that was like a $10,000 commission. But the reason why it fell apart is probably a good thing, and that's because it's your client. It can never be because of your pocket. It has to always be because of your client. I cannot stress that enough. It sucks when it happens, but that's where the value of you as a real estate agent comes in and working in Y4C2Ts, integrity. The I and Y4C2Ts. You have to do it in integrity.
that just reminded, not that integrity part, but, I just wanted to mention this, one of the things that came to mind, in thinking about something that could go wrong was appraisal,
Yeah,
and I didn't realize, I think in a deal that initially when we were writing this offer, I didn't, when I was brand new, I didn't know that if you offer over what you're approved for, then that comes out of pocket.
Mhm.
So that was eye-opening,
Yeah.
if like you don't have, and writing an appraisal, contingency, so I just
Yeah.
wanted to share that, because that was something I had to learn.
yeah,
A more difficult way.
yeah, you have to know, like, if you're pre-approved for X amount. And you also have to look at the percentage of the loan, right? So if this is. They have to know if it's a conventional loan, you can't do 100% conventional loan. Right? Usually it's 80-20. They have to come up with 20%, like, so that's part of that communication. That you and your lender need to communicate to the client, like, this is how much money you need to bring to the table. Do you have access to these funds? You may be required to show that you have access to those funds. Okay, and again, it can't be buried in your backyard in cash. There's real money laundering that goes on, okay? So yeah, understand, you've gotta act in the best interest, and you have to understand all aspects of the contract. Here's the thing, if you're nervous about this, the contract to purchase, drop it into Gemini or ChatGPT. This is how I learned it personally. Drop it in and say, what are the main points that I need to know of this contract? What's the timeline that I need to know? And it will help you. What are some of the parts of this contract that may be problematic in a situation? If I'm representing the buyer and they want to get out of this contract, what parts of this contract can help me in that advantage? So ChatGPT and Gemini, this contract purchase, absolutely.
Just make sure your prompt is limiting it to this.
Yes.
that you're providing.
Yes. Because it's state specific, or it's board specific. Okay, referrals and reviews, oh my gosh, this topic is my dream. Listen, referrals and reviews, you do all this work. You're working with this buyer, I mean, here's the thing. You have this is the life of a transaction, or with your buyer, okay? It's infinite, first of all, but all the work that an agent does, this piece of it is nurturing and finding properties and getting people ready, able, and willing to buy a house. The transaction part, which we just went over, is like this much, okay? But this part, this includes repeats, referrals, reviews, all of it, okay? So you close the deal, the transaction piece is done, but your communication with that client never ends. So repeat business comes from doing a great job, asking for referrals, getting client reviews, and setting up a post-close system. You can ask for referrals at every conversation. You can ask for referrals during the transaction, and you can ask for a referral at the close of the transaction. Your top agents have a post-close system in place that guarantee that as soon as they close on that transaction, they're getting a congratulations. Did you do this, and this? Did you set up your utilities and everything? Actually, the post-close system starts when you get clear to close. Here are all the things that you need to bring to closing. Okay. Day of the closing, you need to be here at this time, and you need to bring this cashier's check. Location, directions, follow up. Are you all good? Did you fund the money? Everything like that. Day after, how are things going? Did you get the movers coordinated? Did you do all this? Every time, ask for a referral. Have a link in there. If you loved your experience with me, I'd love to help more people like you. Leave me a review so you can help build my business, or who do you know that might be willing to buy or sell with me? And then you keep that communication up. You put in command when their home anniversary is, so that on their home anniversary date, they can drop by a basket of, oh my gosh, you've been here for a year. That's so exciting. Make sure you renew that warranty that you bought. How are things going? Maybe rates got cut in half. Maybe it's time to refinance for that project. And so you stay in communication. You ask for referrals. All right. Future opportunities come from repeat referral business. I think it's 82% of people use their same real estate agent. Sellers use their same, and buyers use their same real estate agent. As long as you're communicating with them, right? So in addition to asking for referrals, you ask for client reviews. Being a strong fiduciary, the local expert of choice, and exhibiting unmatched customer service leads to great reviews. Reviews can be leveraged on places like social media, your agent website, Google. Reviews do not only communicate what it's like to work with you, they also can generate new leads. As we discussed this before, the most important thing you can do is get reviews is to give value through your communication relationship, and then you have to ask for a review. Start every relationship by letting the client know that you will ask for their 5-star review. Okay, so not only are you asking them for referrals who may be interested in buying or selling throughout the entire transaction. When the transaction's over, you're asking for that review and you're asking for that referral. Transaction is not just a transfer of money and property or a commission check. Every transaction is a series of opportunities to be of service to your clients. When you give them excellent service and they stay in close emotional proximity through follow-up and touch campaigns, it will reward you with repeat business, referrals, and great reviews. Here's the post-close follow-up that I mentioned. There is a smart plan. You can create a system for your post-close follow-up. Here's some ideas. Post-close follow-up could be a housewarming gift. Right? So you can stop by after they've gotten settled, maybe with a housewarming gift. The beginning of the year. Go through all of your transactions and you need to send them their settlement statement. If they bought a home, they need that for their taxes. I get calls at the brokerage every January. I need a copy of my settlement statement. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if your agent gave that to you? Any documentation when they need it for their taxes. Referrals for contractors. You gotta have a guy. You got a roofer. You got a plumber. That way, if something happens further down the line, because you're staying in communication with them after they bought the house. If they know that you got a guy, then you become their realtor of choice for everything. So 6 months down the line, something breaks. Oh my gosh, I need to call Riel because I know she's got a great roofer. Referrals for contractors. Introduction to dentists. That's weird, but yeah.
You said dentist?
Yeah, it says introduction to dentists, stylists, mechanics, gym. Here's the thing, if they're new to the area, they're new to Cincinnati, they don't know. All right. If you've got a great dentist, or if you have maybe one of your clients is a dentist, know the local gyms, know the local mechanics. If they're moving from a different city, they have no idea. They have to start from fresh. Acknowledge.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
about that? So where is, I was meaning to look this up, but like, where's the line with like steering when it comes to that kind of thing? I guess is that really more about not trying to steer them towards a neighborhood when they're buying? Or does it?
So this is all after they're already in a neighborhood,
Right.
right? It wouldn't be steering if they're already buying in that neighborhood.
Right.
And I get what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I think, so like when they're buying in that specific neighborhood, they're probably already knowing ahead of time, like they're moving to that neighborhood because maybe it's a school district, or they're moving to the neighborhood because proximity to their work. It wouldn't be steering if after they're under contract. And they're buying the house that you're like, this is great, I just wanna show you the 3 or 4 mechanics that are nearby.
Right.
And you can just base it on a geographic location.
Yeah.
I get though what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess, off topic, where I'm really headed with it is kind of off topic, so.
Yeah. Care calls. Call them once a quarter, even though you've already sold a house with, or you've already sold them a house, they better be on a quarterly call plan. You can give them equity updates. Everyone wants to know what their ROI is, return on investment. So after they buy that house, set them up on a monthly neighborhood nurture. It will give them what's going on in their neighborhood, in the market, every single month. They can start to track and look if they would like to see that property values may be going up. Hopefully they're going up. They want to know what their return on investment is. Maybe you set up an annual, on their home anniversary, the value of their house, give them a home evaluation on their home anniversary. Look at this. Oh my gosh, your home value has increased this percent in just 12 months. Look at what equity you have in it. We all get it from the lenders. I mean, I get one from Rocket Mortgage every freaking week and it drives me nuts. I just throw it in the trash. But if it's a personal touch, like, hey, I just want to give you this home valuation, look at how much equity you now have in your house. What other asset can you buy that earns you money? Updates on neighborhood sales, we kind of talked about that. All right. All right, and then here's the thing, you recognize you're building a business. This is not I'm gonna be in it for a year. You're gonna be in it for long term. So identify, if you are staying in contact with those people after they buy their house. Average homeowner sells every 8 to 10 years, 8 to 11 years, that's a cycle. Okay, maybe it could be after 5 years. Here's the thing, my little brother is a perfect example. Him and his wife, they got engaged in July. They bought their first home in August, okay? They got my nephew through adoption. They replaced my nephew, or my nephew was placed with them the day after they moved into that house. Unannounced. So all of a sudden, they're first time home buyers. The day they bought their house they moved into their house August 1st. They were notified August 2nd that they were going to have a baby, that they're having a baby placed with them. Completely unexpected. So now they are living in a home, 2-bedroom house, getting married in October. Okay. On August 2nd, they get notified they're having a kid. Then, like within 24 hours, they had him at the house. Then they get married. 2 months later, guess what? She gets pregnant.
Oh.
All right. So now they lived in this home for 6 months. They have a newborn, and she's pregnant with one on the way.
Now? No.
Yeah,
Wow.
that all happened. All right. Have a baby. They lived in the house for 2 years. And they need to get them to, or they were in the house, I think, 3 years. No, 2 years. And they had to buy a bigger house because they wanted to have another kid. So they have 3 kids, 5 and under. Fun. And they had to sell their house. So they had to sell their house within 2 years. Here's the thing, their real estate agent stayed with them because he was in constant contact with them and he knew that life was happening in that family for them and why they would have to sell. So they had no question that they had to, they used the same real estate agent. And it was during the absolute height craziness of COVID and all this stuff. They bought their house for $220. They sold it in 2 years for $310.
Nice.
Good investment. Life happened. Okay. So if you are not following up with your clients, you're never going to know when they're ready to buy or sell again. So you have to have a system, post-close system. All right, here's some ahas. I know we're over time. This is my favorite. It's my favorite one. Who's got some ahas?
This whole thing's
No,
been my
not.
fault.
I
I've been
know.
saying it all week long. This week has been good. Like I've learned so much.
I know. Post-close system, making sure like during the transaction, like, okay, this is the next step, what you need to bring, things like that, so just keep tabs,
Yeah,
everything.
you have to create a checklist for yourself to stay organized. And there's systems, there's stuff that you can find in Canva, KW Canva, there's stuff that you can find on the board for checklists for the contract, so you can like write in all the timelines and keep yourself organized. There has to be a system, you can put it in an Excel sheet, you can create a system on that. But if you're gonna do all this work for a transaction. And if you take anything from today. You take after this closes to create a post-close system and stay in contact with your clients, because those people that you have transacted with. Are going to send you referrals, they're going to write you great reviews, and you become their realtor for life. And that's the whole goal, okay? What other ahas? Give me two more. Higher TC?
Yes.
I mean, this is good to go through this. A couple of times before you start leveraging it, because you conceptually need to understand everything that is involved in a transaction. But yes, you start closing more than 2 transactions a month, you absolutely need a TC. And we have one in-house, 2,000 laptop. What else? One more.
Always keep a paper trail.
Yes. Ooh. Yes.
I feel like, especially like, probably your first transaction, like, it just sounds so overwhelming, but it's making sure that, okay. You kind of trace back to this, that.
Well, you only know what you know, right? And when you haven't transacted before, you just don't know of all these things that can come up.
Yeah, those timelines were amazing for me to see written out like that, because. That's just eye-opening, that it's that close. You
Yeah.
have to make that many phone calls and
Yeah.
with everyone.
And it's like, I don't like being on the phone once I had to get used to it, and I'm texter, like, so, yeah, well, then, something I gotta do.
Yeah, it used to being uncomfortable.
Yes.
You gotta be used to having uncomfortable conversations too. But I can tell you the conversation is a whole lot more uncomfortable if you don't have clear communication from the beginning.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the knockout for me, and it's, it has to do with, like, what you were saying about professionalism too, and I think. There was a quote on like the Millionaire Real Estate Agent podcast from, I think, Kimber or something, but she was saying that. Maybe it wasn't her, that. Like when you're first starting out, you want to appear confident and like you're the expert, but. I think it's easy to not ask questions and not say, I don't know, but I can find out, and that's what her definition was of, maybe it was her, of what a professional is, somebody who is, if they don't know the answer, they're gonna find it out, and they are gonna try to know what they can.
Here, I love this. This is one of my favorite sayings, and I do this quite often. And I have someone who calls me that stumps me. They don't need to know that they've stumped me. They can say, you know what, I think I have the right answer for that. But I want to check with one of my colleagues real quick, or I usually, refer to Bo or Tara or Maggie, but let me just verify it real quick with someone else in the office, and then I'll call you right back. I could have absolutely no idea what the answer is, but they don't need to know that. But I'm going to then find out who has the right answer, confirm that. That's okay, you don't have to have an answer on the spot every time. And also a suggestion, you don't have to prescribe every single time too.
I feel like
You don't need to know that you have to fix everything. It's okay.
I feel like that's a scary thing about being a professional, like you don't know all the answers, so. We need to call.
Yeah, who do you call? You call a colleague, you call someone at the office, you call the broker, right? Call your resources. It's okay to ask questions.
When
What's
people
the?
call you, cause I'm like, you're
Yeah,
not.
you can call me if I don't have the answer. And here's the thing, I do sometimes be like, "Ooh, that's a good one. I have no idea. Let me find out for you." And then I get back to that person. But that's part of communication. I made a mistake today. Well, I found out that I made a mistake today. It's an uncomfortable mistake. But I called the person I called the three people that I made a mistake with, even though it was uncomfortable. One of them's an agent that's not with us anymore. But I had to communicate it. And I communicated to, it's actually someone at TCG, and I communicated to the agent at TCG, you know what, everything's fine. Everything is fine, because I communicated, fell on my sword, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I fixed it,
Yeah.
and I communicated that I fixed it, and everything's okay. So, alright, you guys good?
We're
Appreciate you
good.
guys staying over with me,
Thank you.
and as I mentioned. Couple times, I'm working on my evaluations. If you are able to leave me a review, I will be super, super happy.
How many do you have now, or you don't?
I don't know yet, I'm afraid to ask, because I don't think it's as many as I think it is. I have to get 75.
So is everyone 75?
It's just, so I'm going for a special certification.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get my KWU certification, so I've taken multiple classes to get this. I have to get 75 for reviews. From more than one market center, so I've taught down in Indiana, or in Louisville, I'm gonna teach in Lexington. And I have to get them by October. And then once I get my 75 reviews, then I will, grab the designation of KWU certified. Certified approver, approved. Yes,
Do we have to add your name? I can't remember.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's go all the way down.
yeah, you have to go all the way down, add my name. It's Ohio Valley region,
You spell it, you're wrong.
EY, Lindsay Johnson, LINDSEY Johnson. That's nice, I just wrote this.
Oh, what a week.
Yeah,
Tell me
about it.
I thought today was gonna be like an easy one. And I'm like, oh, writing all these notes.
It's a good one.
It is a good one.
Exciting. It was a lot of information, short period of time, but I think it was,
Very helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like that. Like going through the process, I mean, especially for, I would imagine for you too. I feel like it's really helpful because I was just noticing things that I was like, man, like if I had known, if I had like learned this a little bit earlier on, it would be like helpful. So.
And you do good with all of your classes, so,
Yeah, yes.
yeah.
but you can always tell when it's like a class that I really get excited, like passionate about, like the database.
Yeah.
This one I love. I get really excited about it. I gotta stop this live stream. Well, thank you all for coming in, and then